I am touching on neoadjuvant therapy, residual disease, and optimizing adjuvant therapy. What I want to stress is that I will be touching a little bit on TNBC as well, and then most of it would be covered tomorrow in the TNBC session. Next slide, please. Now, it's important to understand that the value of neoadjuvant therapy has moved much beyond just breast conservation and increasing the possibility of breast conservation in patients. As we know that those who have a pathologic complete response have a better event-free survival than those with residual disease. The CODSAR analysis has very clearly shown that the HER2 positive and TNBC population, this association is very important. The second issue is about the residual disease, which we have after post neoadjuvant therapy. And as we know that those with residual disease have a poorer prognosis than those who have a pathologic complete response. And this is now used for guiding the adjuvant therapy after neoadjuvant therapy. So you have personalization of therapy in this setting of post neoadjuvant therapy. Next slide, please. So who should be considered as of today, considering all this data for preoperative systemic therapy? As you can see that we know that it should be considered in high tumor volume versus breast ratio to facilitate breast conservation, lymph node positive, those patients with high risk like high grade triple negative, HER2 positive, that is TNBC also, and younger age at diagnosis. And of course, in patients with HER2 positive early breast cancer, given the results of the Catherine study and then, of course, the introduction of dual HER2 blockade, it should be used in patients with more than 2 centimeters in diameter or those who have node positive disease. It is that is why it is important to have a multidisciplinary approach so that you don't have these patients seeing you after the surgeon has already operated on them. Next slide, please. As you can see that this association in the CODSAR analysis has been very clear, and you can see the blue line with the pathologic complete response being very evidently above that of the red line with no pathologic complete response, and this being very, very prominent in the HER2 positive population. Next slide. Now, what are the strategies we try to use to improve the results of neoadjuvant therapy? The first one being, of course, the improvement in the pathologic complete response rates by chemotherapy modification. Two of the most important studies, one from UK by Smith et al. And the GPAR trio study. Chemotherapy modification was made, but the improvement in pathologic complete response was not significant and had no impact on the survival. The dual HER2 blockade definitely improved the pathologic complete response rates, as we know from the Neosphere study. The post-neoadjuvant strategies, that is the HER2 negative population, or the CREATE X was the important study, and this was the first study which indicated that personalization of post-neoadjuvant therapy is possible if we look at the residual disease. And then if you look at the HER2 positive population, it's the Catherine study. Dr. Bafna has elucidated this and made my job easier. Next slide, please. So this is a very important study or the article by Martin Picard et al., where it showed that if you look at early breast cancer and neoadjuvant treatment, in various subtypes of breast cancer, you could think of various strategies to address the residual disease. What is important is what is at the bottom, that what are the various markers of residual disease which could help us to actually stratify this residual disease and think of which patients with residual disease should actually receive adjuvant personalization. So one is about the ctDNA and NGS. There is some data that before neoadjuvant and in the residual disease, the ctDNA could tell us those patients who might go worse off than those patients who would do better. Then xenograft models the presence of lymphovascular emboli tills Ki67, and we know that this holds true. So those patients with a higher Ki67 would do better with the neoadjuvant therapy with better PCR rates. And if they have a residual disease, they are more likely to respond to therapy. Then, of course, the gene expression profile is also important, but these are very preliminary data, and for shortage of time, I won't be able to go through this. Next slide, please. Then, of course, what are the various trastuzumab and pertuzumab data regarding the neoadjuvant protocol that can be used in these patients? So you have various studies, the TRAIN2, Christine, Trifina. Here, in all these patients, you can see that the response and pathologic complete responses are much better in the ER negative, that is the light blue line, compared to the ER positive patients. So this is seen across all studies. Next slide, please. And this is just to show you the HER2 enriched population, the HER2 positive, and association with PCR with preoperative chemotherapy. So you have various studies from the NOVA study right up to the Christine and the Berenice study, and you can see that the PCR rates are almost going from 50 to 74%, more so with the use of the dual HER2 blockade. Next slide. Then, if you look at the Catherine study, so coming to how we can optimize post neoadjuvant therapy. So, if these were locally advanced or even T1C to T4 lesions, node negative, node positive, with HER2 positive disease, and who had completed minimum 6 cycles of chemotherapy, so that is important. So, one should not consider this for patients who have just had an incomplete chemotherapy with like a sandwich like surgery in between. With a minimum 9 weeks of taxanes and anthracycline and alkylating based therapy included. So the primary endpoint, as was stated, was the invasive disease-free survival, and there were other secondary endpoints. Next slide, please. So if you look at the invasive disease-free survival, you can see that at 3 years, it was 77% in the trastuzumab alone arm versus the TDM1 arm. It was 88.3% with a hazard ratio of zero point 0.5. That means the chance of disease recurrence was reduced by almost 50%, and which was highly significant. As was mentioned, one of the secondary endpoints was also important, is the pathologic complete response rate and the differences in that. As far as the overall survival, although it is stated that it hasn't reached significance, but the data is not mature enough to tell us about the overall survival data. But based on this study and this primary endpoint having been met, it was approved for treatment of residual disease post either trastuzumab with chemotherapy as neoadjuvant, that was almost 90% of the patient population, and a small percentage of population who had the neoadjuvant dual HER2 blockade. Next slide, please. So what is important is the efficacy is seen amongst all the subgroups. So whether it is hormone receptor positive or negative, whether they are node positive or negative, across all age groups and across all ethnic populations as well. Next slide, please. Now, this is the conclusion from that study where, as I said, a statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvement in the invasive disease-free survival, and also the benefit was consistent amongst all the subgroups, and the safety data is also very manageable. Peripheral neuropathy being one of the side effects that one has to look out for. Of course, as I said, the overall survival data is not mature as yet. Next slide. Next slide. So this has set the stage for what is now considered the standard of care for HER2 positive patients receiving neoadjuvant therapy. Next slide, please. And next slide. Sorry, go back to the previous slide. What is important is it has also shown that even suppose we were to use trastuzumab plus an anthracycline and taxane-based regime, we would still have a way of, personalizing the therapy after the neoadjuvant setting with residual disease. So this is another important take home that even though we have not used the dual HER2 blockade in almost 75 to 80% of the patients, these patients with residual disease did benefit from the addition of TDM1. Next slide. Also important is the absolute difference in the IDFS is 11.5%. So that is why it is considered clinically meaningful. Next slide. And the benefit by subgroups, as I've already mentioned, what is important is this is some of the data which has come out from the ESMO 2019 and also reiterated in the ASCO 2020, that even if you have patients with very small residual disease, because this is always a question in front of the clinician, that what if the residual disease is just in the form of few millimeter disease, would they benefit? Well, this is important to show that irrespective of the amount of residual disease, all the patients benefit by the addition of the TDM1. Next slide. This is again data from ASCO 2020, where they have tried to look at various biomarkers which may help us to indicate which patients with residual disease would benefit with TDM1. Now, PIK3CA mutation is known to actually influence the outcome in patients even with HER2 positive disease. But as far as the Catherine study is concerned and the outcome with TDM1, PIK3CA mutation did not affect the benefit of adding TDM1 in those with residual disease. And then, of course, if you look at the high HER2 gene expression, it was associated with worse outcomes in the trastuzumab arm, but not so in those patients with the TDM1 arm. So these are two important biomarker studies presented at the ASCO 2020, again indicating that irrespective of clinical features as well as biomarkers, this strategy does benefit patients with residual disease. Next slide. So what is new now in the neoadjuvant setting in the HER2 positive breast cancer? As you can see, that not many new drugs are being added in this or being explored in this setting, but there are vaccine studies which are ongoing to look at whether post neoadjuvant can the PCR be improved or the results be improved by the addition of two vaccines. So there are two vaccine trials in progress, but I think after the advent of the results of Catherine study, it might be difficult to recruit patients for this study. Next slide. So this is the approach, and this is just to reiterate what Dr. Ajay Bafna said. And you can see that those with new adjuvant treatment with residual disease is TDM1, and if they have a pathologic complete response, then it is trastuzumab with pertuzumab. In the high risk population, as we know, these are the ones who benefited in the affinity trial. Next slide. Now, coming to a slight few words about the TNBC, and this was actually the first study of post neoadjuvant therapy, which brought out this concept that one could improve the outcome of patients with residual disease by personalizing the therapy, and this was the CREATE X study, the Japanese study. Next slide. So these were HER2 negative patients. So they were triple negative as well as hormone receptor positive. And as you can see, the overall population, the intent to treat population, also the disease-free survival was superior significantly in those patients who received adjuvant capecitabine, and this was more pronounced in the triple negative breast cancer population. And hence, next slide please. Next slide. Despite some of the controversies regarding the use of adjuvant capecitabine in this particular residual disease post neoadjuvant, one would consider the use of capecitabine in this patient population. And now these are some of the trials of post neoadjuvant therapy in TNBC. The important one being capecitabine being randomized to platinum in case of residual disease after neoadjuvant therapy, and then of course the use of PARP inhibitors, and secondly the use of immunotherapy. Next slide please. So this is the Keynote 522 study design. As you are aware that chemotherapy was used along with pembrolizumab versus no pembrolizumab or a placebo, and then after surgery the patients were continued on 9 more cycles of pembrolizumab or placebo. Next slide please. So if you see that, if you look at the experimental arm, then the pathologic complete response rates are significantly better with the addition of immunotherapy to this chemotherapy protocol. And even the progressive disease is significantly lesser in the immunotherapy arm versus the placebo arm. Now, suffice it to say that the other study along with this, the Neo-Tripoli study, was negative, but I think that will be addressed tomorrow in the TNBC session. But this was the positive study in the TNBC population. Next slide, please. So this is the study which is ongoing, that platinum-based chemotherapy or capecitabine in treating patients with residual disease and triple negative breast cancer. And it is accruing, so it would be an interesting study to look forward to. Next slide. So this is what the NCCN guidelines now has incorporated all this. And as you can see that in the HER2 positive disease and the triple positive disease, we have the inclusion of TDM1 in these patients who have residual disease post neoadjuvant. And in the triple negative, you have capecitabine as included in these patients with residual disease as far as the TNBC population is concerned. Next slide. So I would like to conclude by saying that the neoadjuvant strategy is setting the stage for personalizing the post-neoadjuvant therapy. The robust DFS improvement in the Catherine study across all subgroups supports the adjuvant TDM1 in this setting. And capecitabine, as we know, has been incorporated in the treatment of residual disease in TNBC, and the initial results of neoadjuvant and adjuvant immunotherapy incorporation in TNBC are promising, and we look forward to, because the already it has been put for an FDA approval, so we look forward to whether this would become a new standard of care in the TNBC population. Thank you.